Hello, welcome to the ESRC Festival of Social Science. Thank you for joining us this evening. My name is James Brown and I work at the Warwick Institute of Engagement, and it's a real pleasure to introduce our panel and our speakers for this evening. We've got an incredible sort of global panel who are going to be looking at different sustainability issues. But before we get into that, just a quick plug for the other events that we're running this week. We've got over 15 events organised by Warwick, and there's more than 100 taking part as part of the festival. You can find all those events here at warwick.ac.uk/ESRC FOSS, Festival of Social Science. They're all free, they're all online. So register and make the most of seeing as many of those as you can. You can also follow us on Twitter at Warwick Engages, and you can follow the hashtag ESRC Festival to make sure you're continuing the conversation after the event as well. On that note, please do use the chat at the side of the video. If you're watching this through the Eventbrite, you might need to just click on the video and go through to the YouTube page to see the chat next to the video. But we want your questions, we want you to take part. So please put as many questions as you can for our panel. Don't make it too easy for them. We need to make sure they're working hard. So as many questions as you can. And also, let us know where you're joining us from. One of the advantages of this incredible online platform is that we can get people from around the world joining in and asking questions. So let us know where you're joining us from. I'm here in Birmingham in England. It is grey and rainy and dark and pretty cold. So you can make me jealous by telling me how amazing the weather is where you are as well. But that is enough from me. So I'm going to hand over to our chair for the session. It's Diana Ruiz, and Diana's joining us from Quito in Ecuador. She's an industrial engineer, but she's got real interest in environmental sustainability and projects all about development. So she's going to be chairing the session. So without much further ado, let me hand over to Diana.
Thank you very much, James, for the introduction. I am happy to chair this interesting session about the role of social science research in tackling global climate change. We come with a multidisciplinary panel, and I will start to introduce our speakers. So, first, let's welcome to Dr. Mariela Jovinca. She's a Bolivian researcher and academic. Her research interests fall in circular economy and bioeconomy. She worked on environmental biotechnology in several international universities in China, Mexico, and the UK. She joined the UNAM at the Faculty of Chemistry to pursue her PhD with a focus on biogas production and development of sustainable solutions for organic waste. So, Dr. Mariela, you're welcome.
Hi, thank you, Diana.
Okay. Second, let's welcome Fany Ramos. She holds a Bachelor in Environmental Engineering by the Polytechnic Institute of Mexico and a Master's degree in Environmental Change and International Development by the University of Sheffield in the UK. She worked on projects on renewable energies, waste and water management, environmental education, climate change, among others. She has been part of the Plurinational Authority of Mother Earth in Bolivia, which is the national authority on climate change. You are welcome, Fany.
Thank you, Diana. Thank you, everyone, for the invitation and for being in this time to share these ideas. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. And third, and not less important, we have here Adolfo Mejia. He studied a bachelor's in physics at the UNAM and a master's degree in sustainable energy systems from the Edinburgh University School of Engineering. Currently, he is a PhD candidate at the University of Edinburgh, exploring the development of utility-scale wind power in Oaxaca, with an emphasis in social science. Currently, Adolfo works as course organizer for the Energy Systems and Technologies course from the University of Edinburgh and as independent consultant in energy projects. Adolfo, you are welcome.
Thank you very much, Diana. Looking forward to share some hopefully interesting insights.
Sure you will. So please, Dr. Mariela, we'll start with you. The floor is all yours.
Thank you, Diana. So today I'm going to share a little bit about the sustainable policies here in Bolivia. So James is going to help me with the slides. So James, you can help me, the first one. Well, Before to start, I want to clarify that there is analysis of developing countries, laws, and policies has provided evidence that are very often general without consistency, which is explained by the fact that they're trying to satisfy different interests. So there are laws that can be very beneficial in theory for all people, but they can be applied in different ways. There is a limitation in successful implementation to the many errors in interpretation and also to the application of the law. So today I'm going to talk about the sustainable policies in my country. And next slide, please. Sustainable policies. Bolivia has policies that are very well elaborated theoretically, but they're affecting many different sectors in the way that they're being implemented. So that's why for this panel, I propose like 5 points, like a brief introduction, the action and measurements from 2009 and 2013, the changes of the government, the pillars to the Constitute of Dignified Bolivia, and the conclusions. Next, please. As the introduction, on 2000, next, click. Thank you. In 2025 will be the 200th anniversary of Bolivia independence, and to commemorate this historical milestone, the government has proposed 13 pillars to the Constitute the Dignified and Sovereign Bolivia, with the aim of building a more inclusive, participatory, and democratic society. Next one. Well, there's, okay. The process of the transformation will include the rejection of the dominant development of paradigm and also the promotion and characterized by the respect of Mother Earth. Next one. Yeah. All right. So the actions and measurements that were established with the former government from 2009 and 2013 were beyond the action. The first idea and the reflection of the government on sustainable policies and the environment were embodied in the National Development Plan, the NDP, building on the principle of living well. The NDP details the process for the change, which consists of consolidating the presence and the original dominion of the state in its role as a promoter and also the protagonist of sustainable use of natural resources, developing national policies from a holistic vision that restores the balance between the need for conservation of nature and the economic needs of national development, whose axis is the environmental planning. The concrete policies and the strategies were grouped in three: the forest, the biodiversity, and the climate change. For the forest, it was proposed to control over the forest resources and also the productive transformation of the forest sector. In biodiversity, the protection and management of sustainable use and the balance between development needs and the conservation. For climate change, was proposed the reduction of the greenhouse gases. Next one. The changes that the government made for the sustainable policies, the most notable advance has been the political inclusion of the sectors that the so-called social movements, and the expression of its plurality is the unprecedented plurinational composition of both assemblies. So that's why in the 2010, the norms derived from the new political constitution of the state have been institutionally constructed through the exercise of the plurinational legislative assembly. And the development of the management to live well, the progress is certainly limited. Although, as indicated, the government external position on climate change is clearly critical in the construction of development to live well, both from the point of view of economic development and its sustainability. Also, in this was approval of the law of the rights of the Mother Earth, that one could hope that the situation would improve, since it aims the development of public policies and the systematic action of prevention, early warning, protection, and precaution to avoid the activities leading to the extinction of populations of beings, and also the alteration of the cycles and the process that guarantee the life of destruction of life systems, which include the cultural systems that are part of Mother Earth. Next, please. So in 2013, 13 pillars of the dignified and sovereign Bolivia were proposed within so-called patriotic agenda that emphasize a holistic approach to the achieving the sustainable development to all. As this slide shows, the pillars are in line with the 17 SDGs, and it is a vision for improve a more equitable trade as well as coordinated investment initiatives. This to promote a more sustainable development across borders. To date, work has been done and progress made of them. And I want to highlight especially two of these pillars. I'm not going to read all, actually it looks like really small. So the next slide, please. The pillar that I want to highlight is the 7th pillar, the sovereignty over the natural resources. That has these 2 NDP goals, and they're related with the 7 and the 9. With the 7 and the 9 SDG. For me, we should include, and also is in line with the 11 SDG of sustainable communities and cities. The goal of the nationalization of resources that are being administered by the state are in harmony and in balance with Mother Earth. Next one. The 9th pillar, there are 8 goals, 2 of which have been achieved, such as the international recognition of the rights of Mother Earth, and also the fulfillment of a goal 12 on responsible production and consumption. And of course, the 15 SDG, that is the life terrestrial ecosystem. Next one. Finally, for the conclusion for this, we have that the environment and sustainable policies in Bolivia have undergone for drastic changes in the last 20 years, and the legal norms elaborated in all cases have been reinforced the punitive character without considering the one of great problems that makes a fulfillment of the policies and the norms unfeasible in the limited capacity of the management of the state, mainly in the preventing and control capacity, which is a chronic problem. However, we are progressing, we have work done, and we're looking forward for more improvement in our sustainable policies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dubinka. Your insights were very useful for the audience and for the panel. We continue with Fany. Please go ahead.
I'm sorry, we seem to have lost Fany. I think maybe her internet connection has seemed to have dropped out. She might join us again in a moment, but perhaps we can rearrange the order and go to Adolfo.
Okay, so we will give the word to Adolfo to continue with his presentation, please. Floor is all yours.
Thank you, Dana. Thank you, James. Okay, let's see the slides. Excellent. Thank you very much. Well, talking about climate change, I want to focus on a very specific area, which is energy and specifically energy transitions. And I would like to build a case on why social sciences are very important in order to understand and to implement energy transitions. Next slide, please. Well, let's first talk about energy. And energy can take many different forms. We can talk about thermal energy or electrical energy or mechanical energy. But in essence, energy is kind of like the price that any event has to, or change has to pay in the universe in order to happen. And we're talking from really small events like a particle moving or a quantum transition, for example, in an atom, to really supernova-sized explosions in the universe. So any different event in the universe will have to be backed up by energy. But we are specifically interested in one definition of energy, which is the power to do work that produces light, heat, or motion, or the fuel or electricity uses for power. And this definition is especially important for us because it's the backbone of every activity that we do in modern society, from cooking to using electrical power to moving ourselves in cities, for example, using, I don't know, the metro or automobiles, power in agriculture, for example, or lighting our houses and streets. Everything that we do in our society needs energy and is normally produced in these ways of light, heat, or motion. And because of that, energy is very important and has been very important for us for building modern societies. However, there has been a problem that energy, in the way that we generate it, has been producing a lot of greenhouse gas emissions, and that this has created the climate that we are aware now of, climate change. So we're trying to find ways in order to mitigate these effects. Next slide, please. So energy related to climate change, normally the approach that has been taken in order to mitigate these effects of how we produce and how we consume energy has been taking a techno-economic approach that says that we have to migrate from one kind of technology, fossil fuels, to renewable technologies or clean sources, for example, solar or wind or biomass. And this kind of like technical rationale or techno-economic rationale has been the one adopted since the beginning in order to back energy transitions. And we have been doing some really good advance, some really good outcomes in this area. Since 2014, for example, the production or the new inputs of renewable energy generation has been actually more than the fossil fuels or like carbon or gas. This means that every year since 2014, the world has added more generating capacity from renewable sources than from fossil sources. But still, as we can see in the top right part of the slide, it's still far away in order to be a sustainable energy system. Next slide, please. And I think that the way that we frame it, techno-economic rationale, has been part of this problem. If we only see energy systems as maybe a flow of electrons or different technologies that can produce, that can take energy resources and transform them in energy services at a specific cost and then sell it at a higher profit, is a fundamental approach that has been working to some extent and is necessary in order to produce these technologies and to know that they are economically feasible. But we are forgetting that these black box that are energy systems are also deeply rooted in natural systems and into human systems, and that there are institutions and that there are historical backgrounds and that there are behaviors and systems of values that might be hindering or that might be actually accelerating energy transitions in some places. So next slide, please. One clear case study or one clear example of this, the lack of inclusion of a human dimension or of a social dimension of these energy transitions can be found in Oaxaca and the development of utility scale wind power. Oaxaca is the state with the highest indigenous population rate in Mexico. And since 2006, when wind power was developing, there was some previous meetings 6 years before in order to address these regulations on how wind power can be technically and economically feasible, and how to improve transmission infrastructure in order to bring electricity from Oaxaca to the city center, and everything was built on this techno-economical rationale, but this social rationale on how to approach this specific indigenous population, for example, how to address issues of human rights, of previous covenants, for example, that Mexico has signed about indigenous people. These kind of were overlooked, and this brought a lot of different issues and problems, which resulted in a sustained resistance from indigenous and peasant groups for the last years, and which have hindered the ability to deploy these projects in a correct and a just way. And more recently, in 2014, after the energy reform in Mexico, the government and the actors have to create specific areas in the energy ministry in order to address this initial overlooking of a social dimension, and they created a specific regulatory mechanisms like the social impacts assessment or the indigenous consultation processes in order to bring this social dimension and to try to manage these issues that are not only technical or economical. And as an outcome, I think that the whole development of utility-scale wind power in Oaxaca has been very complicated. Many issues and many injustices have been committed, and now the development has been, in the last years, has been slower than in other parts of the country because of this invisibilization of the social dimension of energy transitions at the beginning. Next slide, please. So, building from this case study and learning the lessons of this case study, we can see how social sciences are inherently related to energy transitions, and how these different technologies that we saw in the beginning, for example, lightning, is not only about how you produce lightning, but that's using, for example, different solar systems for lightning in isolated places can decrease gender violence, for example, in some places. So it's a direct entanglement to this social dimension. Transitioning, for example, from traditional biomass can help decrease health impacts in women and children in some households, or using a specific electrical transportation, specific technologies for electrical transportation can result in a later, more easy integration to renewable energy technologies. Using, for example, distributed solar can be entangled with agriculture. And there are emerging topics, for example, right now in the UK about a just transition, and how a just transition not only means migrating from fossil technologies to renewable energy technologies, but also how can we provide jobs and skills to the people who was working in the energy sector, so they can still work in the energy sector, but in an energy sector that is changing, that has new technologies, and that therefore requires new abilities, new skills for workers to be able to move with the technologies. So we need this social science perspective into energy transitions in order to have a holistic and more just energy transition. Next slide, please. So, well, thank you very much. If anyone has some questions, you can, or you were interested in this topic, you can later contact me on my email. And I hope that this has been interesting for you, and see you in the answers and questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Adolfo. Thank you very much for your thoughts. I'm sure all the audience liked your intervention, and this is interesting that you invite to take actions in this matter, because this is a global concern issue. So let's give the word to Fany to start her presentation. Fany.
Thank you, Diana. Thank you. I had a small issue with the internet, but I'm back. Thank you. So I'm gonna share now the topic I have chosen for this panel. I really like the name of this panel: Global Challenges Require Global Collaboration. I am sure about that. after some years of work in government and international level and also at local level on environmental issues, it's really a key issue to overcome the environmental challenges that we have currently. I have chosen this topic. I called this the Paris Agreement Collaborative Approach for Supporting an Effective and Fair Global Energy Transition under the Climate Change Conditions. Let's see what's this about. Next slide, please. Well, I think it's interesting and important, firstly, have a look at the goal of the Paris Agreement. That is the current global agreement under all the countries are working on towards limiting the global warming. And also to give some actions for adaptation to this global issue. And we have to remember that the main goal of the Paris Agreement is to limit the rise of the global temperature below 2 degrees Celsius, and also to pursue efforts to limit the temperature increase even further to 1.0 grades centigrades. So, but what's the problem so far? This is the goal, okay, the promise of the Paris Agreement. However, some studies from UN shows that with the current pledges for CO2 emission reductions, the global temperature is actually going to increase to the end of the century in 3 grades Celsius. So this ensures really bad scenario for all the peoples in the world, and especially for the most vulnerable. And so these studies also shows that from 2020, from this year, actually the carbon emissions should be reduced a rate of 7.6% per year to meet this goal. But we are far from that targets so far. Next slide, please. We have also, well, it's important also to review this information. What are the main sectors that are contributing, emitting these greenhouse gas emissions? And one of the main sectors that have been identified by different scientists all over the world as well is the energy sector. And inside the energy sector, well, there are other subsectors that contribute to these emissions. And one of those is transportation, heating, housing, manufacturing as well. And as we can see in this graph, energy means that 74% of the greenhouse gas emissions from the world. So that's why most of the countries and the so-called developed countries, because they have these big factories and industries and so on, these countries are focusing their efforts on reducing their emissions on the energy sector. Next slide, please. And I should add that according to scientists, also the countries should focus on this sector, the energy sector, because this will allow also to move to a wider use of renewable energies. And one of the key issues to move towards to a renewable use is the key issue of storage. And in this aspect, lithium is take a key role in this transition because it's a key mineral. So far, as we know, lithium is used for building the batteries for cars, for phones, for all the electronic devices. And that's why this mineral is currently highly important to support the energy transition, not only in one country, in Bolivia, or in the South America, but in the globe, in the planet. Well, as we know, in Bolivia and in South America, in other South American countries like Chile and Argentina, we have a lot of reserves of lithium. And regarding the political perspectives of each country, this lithium industry is being it's been driven in different ways. And in Bolivia, it has some specific characteristics, and some of the characteristics of the Bolivian reservoirs are shown in this slide. Firstly, Uyuni is one of the most important lithium reservoirs in the world. Second, there is a big social demand locally in the region where the Uyuni salt flats are located. A big demand for increasing the benefits and participation also on the decision-making process related to lithium. And Uyuni is also a highly vulnerable ecosystem. It's considered one of the 34 biodiversity hotspots of the world. So the industrialization of the lithium in Bolivia have strong, well, in the region, have strong negative effects on landscape, on water reservoirs, on food local production, on biodiversity due to toxic waste, etc. And so regardless the advancements that Bolivia had on the extraction and the industrialization of lithium, this is in its early stages so far. Therefore, it's key for Bolivia and for the region and for the peoples of the world to find a responsible and appropriate and also a fair way of driving this lithium industrialization that is directly linked to the global energy transition. Next slide, please. Thank you. Well, one issue that is important also to put over the table in this discussion is also to have a look who are the main emitters, what countries are the main emitters of greenhouse gases. And also, this is important to show and visualize what are also the countries that are most affected for the climate change, which paradoxically are not or are the least emitters. For instance, in this graph, we can see the main emitters. I think all of you know which countries are, but here we cannot even see Bolivia, just as example. But Bolivia is one of the most affected countries. It's one of the most vulnerable countries in the world due to our biodiversity, due to also the complexity of the politics, of the economy, of the social situation of the country, the current situation. And so also it's important to have a look at the historical data on emissions, to also talk about the fair energy transition. Why we are talking about a fair energy transition? We have to take into consideration all of these aspects in order to take future action for a more effective international policies to tackle climate change. Please, next slide. And there is where the justice concept and talk have light, because due to these differences, due to these historical differences and historical responsibilities as well among the different countries in the world. So one of the principles of the UNFCCC as you may know, is the common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities. And what does it mean? That means that the higher emitters and the biggest emitters, historically and also currently, should also have higher mitigation targets in their special, and also they should have higher commitments for supporting the adaptation of the most vulnerable and the most affected peoples in the world. Next slide, please. And well, and from this principle of the UNFCCC, the Paris Agreement could have this Article 6 that talks about how the reduction of the emissions could be managed. The paragraph 2 and 4 talk about market approaches, how countries can cooperate for international transference of mitigation outcomes towards the NDC implementations. But the paragraph 8 is a very interesting also paragraph that talk about non-market approaches. That means an integrated, holistic, and balanced approaches, also to assist the implementation of the different NDCs. However, it should also aim to promote the mitigation and adaptation ambition, but under also coordinated institutional arrangements. So these are two different approaches that contain the Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. And this paragraph 8 has been pushed also by the, let's say, the developing countries and the most affected countries by the climate change. Also, looking at the historical responsibilities and the principle of CBDR at the UNFCCC in order to maybe give bigger steps towards an effective climate action. Next slide, please. I should also add that market approaches so far under the Kyoto Protocol have been implemented under these schemes. MDL is the Clean Development Mechanism, and RED Plus. And these market approaches have several reports on the social the social conflicts that has been created under these market approaches. And that's one of the reasons also why governments have pushed for non-market approaches, because these countries, the most affected, are also looking for a more collaborative ways of tackling climate change, and there are also this climate and environmental justice approach. And so I think this is the key message of this talk, and this is the importance of this approach for enhancing the international collaborative perspective to tackle climate change. So next slide, please. As conclusions, I would say that to meet the Paris Agreement targets on time, it is necessary to increase an inclusive collaboration among countries, developed and developing countries, under their different approaches. So market approaches, non-market approaches, as the Paris Agreement also states and acknowledges. Also, for an effective global adaptation, it is necessary to implement the climate justice approach, because there are different countries that are the most affected and the least emitters. They are the least emitters as well. Also, learning from past, the current and the future energy transition towards a carbon neutral planet must be as fair as we can. we are not in the time to do or to commit the same mistakes of the past. And well, the mitigation is important to limit the greenhouse gases, the emissions, the global warming. However, for the most vulnerable people, the adaptation is and must be a priority. And I should add also that, well, that the social science is key for improving this humankind-nature relationship, because we need the social perspective to improve the use also of technologies for mitigating climate change and adaptation to climate change. But one of the issues that I think we are forgetting or not advancing as we need is to improve this relationship between humankind and nature. And social science is key for that. And thank you for for having me here.
Thank you very much, Fany. Very interesting, your presentation. Definitely, we need to collaborate each other. Social science will help us to do that in order to tackle climate change and try to construct and sculpt cross-border solutions, not only local, because we need this society not make the same mistakes from before. So we will move to some questions we have from the audience to the panel. I will direct to the panelists respectively, so you can answer. So we have the first question from Rafael Quintero. He's asking to Dr. Jubinka how to transpose the 13 pillars to other countries in Latin America. Dr. Jubinka, you are muted, I think.
Sorry. All right. How to transpose? Oh, the idea is gone. No, just kidding. The transposition is typically done by either primary legislation or secondary legislation. So to transpose the 13 pillars, I think that should be with statistics of numbers and types of the infringements per country and sector. So Bolivia proposed 13 pillars in 2013, and also the UN sent this the 17 goals, the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, on 2015. So we weren't far from the proposal that it has. So I think that to transpose this, we must do it with statistics and also the number and types of infringements.
Okay, thank you. You referred to awareness. This is a good thing. Okay, so we have the second question. This is directed to Adolfo from Good News. Good News is asking, how can countries store solar energy for 24/7 distribution to households and firms in the transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy?
Okay, thank you, Diana. Well, I think that's very much related with the presentation from Fany, right? We're looking at a revolution on lithium and these technologies for storing energy in order to kind of like countermeasure this intermittency from solar power technologies and wind power and all that. So there's natural rhythms day and night that will make difficult for these technologies to contribute all the time to the electrical grid, and that's why these storage technologies are being developed. But and that's why I think that the presentation from Fany is very important, because clearly we are going to develop the technologies that can overcome these issues, but for the transition. But we need to ensure that this transition is just. So we need to make that the supply from lithium, for example, for these technologies is made in a right way that doesn't overburdens people from Bolivia, for example, for a world energy transition. So I think the storage technologies will be there. The problem is how are we going to make them?
So thank you very much, Adolfo. This is another question for you related to this topic. This is from Micaela Flores. She is asking, energy transition implementation in developing countries, Latin America specifically, is still under work. What do you think is necessary to foster these initiatives?
I think that political certainty is key, right? So we need that different Latin American politicians and parties, and they compromise with energy transitions and with this with clear mechanisms, financial and with legislation, as Mariela was saying, to pave the way and to make certainty and for people to actually build these initiatives. But I also think that the context of Latin America also calls for inclusion. And I think that kind of relates to another question from Rafael, right, on how to include indigenous communities, for example, or different rural communities as active stakeholders. And I think that some countries, for example, like Chile, has been doing some work on legislation, for example, through this generación comunitaria, like mechanisms to include communities, indigenous communities, in the development of renewable energy projects, and the government being facilitating like matchmaking between business, companies, private, and indigenous communities. And that might be some specific ways in which Latin American countries can find a way towards energy transition and renewables.
Okay, thank you, Adolfo. This is a question from Rafael Quintero to Fany Ramos. Which non-market actions do you deem more important to tackle climate change?
Thank you, Rafael. Well, actually, the non-market approaches are have been pushed by developing countries in the Paris Agreement, but they weren't sure, and I think most of the countries are not sure really, or on how to move on these non-market approaches. And there is also the importance of research from also the social perspective to build up the roadmap on how to apply these non-market approaches, because these non-market approaches were pushed under the idea of a market is not working, or it's not working for all. And those are the examples of RED and RED Plus and some of the clean development mechanisms, because there are some in many countries, actually in Latin America and Asia, examples of what kind of conflicts are taking place with indigenous peoples and with local communities under these approaches of markets. So they just pushed for non-market approaches. Let's try what can be that. And so far, at least from Bolivia, in Bolivia, I have been part of the negotiation team for some time, and I think at least from the Bolivian perspective, one of the actions that should be taken during the following years is, for instance, to get agreements between developed and developing countries to advance in one direction, let's say, to support the adaptation of Bolivia, for instance. Okay, and how can we support the adaptation? Also, I would say investing on lithium industry, for instance, but under non-market approach. Okay, I'm not sure. I hope I can answer this question. As I said before, non-market approaches needs to be built up, but one of the things that we have to take into consideration is these two-direction actions. Developing countries needs support from the wealthiest countries for adaptation, But also developing countries have big resources also to support the global mitigation actions. For example, lithium that can be support the energy transitions. And we have to find a way to support the industrialization and the industrialization of this mineral in Bolivia, also to generate better conditions for local people, and it should be under non-market approaches.
Thank you very much, Fany. So insightful, your answer. We continue with a question from Ecuador. Hussein Rahman. This is directed to Adolfo. How to promote the use of renewable energy in countries where much of the jobs depend on the petroleum industry?
Yeah, I think it's kind of like related with this topic of the just transition, right? So many of these economies who rely on oil and these fossil resources are having a hard time on migrating to renewable energy systems, but it's not that we don't have resources. We have a lot of resources, for example, on solar. We are clearly rich on solar, for example, or wind. The problem is that we don't have still the industrialization to manufacture, for example, these technologies. So that's mainly, for example, for wind power in Denmark or in Germany or in the USA. So the problem here is how to move these value chains, industry, manufacturing to Latin American countries. And that's a very deep issue. I think that's why we were talking about policies, and these specific and clear policies has to introduce issues of manufacturing and developing these sectors, right? It's not only about European or companies from the US getting to Latin America and building their projects in kind of like a neo extractivist way, but it's how to make that these new manufacturing industries are created in our countries, so people can access these jobs, and it's not only we see an economic rationale behind it and not only an environmental one.
Thank you, Adolfo. Indeed, supply chain must need to be improved to tackle this problem from innovation. Yep. So we need to create these innovative jobs to try to improve the situation. Okay, we have another question to Dr. Ljubinka. This is from Claudia Vargas. Could you recommend policy measures to prevent wildfires in the Bolivian Amazon?
Again, policy. Well, in Bolivia, actually this year, it was more than 25% of major fires year burn in protected areas. So I think that more than the fires was a poor policy rather than a low capacity of management. I think that it should be talked through, and because, as I said, 25% was the major fires, and I think that probably that should be added to one of the pillars and protect our welfare, our Amazons and protect areas.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Ljubinka. Well, we are running out of time, so I just want to thank you all our speakers. Thank you very much for enriching insights and the audience for joining us in this amazing discussion. I invite all the audience to think over actions to propel these concepts, all the concepts discussed in this panel, and the intentions spread just for a better future in our society. I thank to the Institute of Engagement of the University of Warwick for sponsoring this interesting event and allow us to expand our knowledge globally in social concern issues. Thank you very much again, and I hope you have a nice rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you
you
very
for
much,
having
Diana.
us.
Thank you to all.
Bye. Thank you,
Bye.
James, Diana.
Thank you all.